Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thank you for joining me for the podcast where our personal stories remind us how much we can learn from each other. Today, we'll hear from Scott Martin, a coach who lived through the unthinkable, a man who lost his hands, his feet, and the identity had spent decades building, yet somehow found a deeper purpose on the other side. This is a story about resilience, reinvention, and the power of the human will. Scott, thanks for joining me today.
Morning, Mel.
Morning. So, who was Scott Martin before this illness as a coach, athlete, husband, and a leader?
I was an aggressive person. I guess it might say type A sort of person, but I always had the objective of reaching for high goals. Being in athletics, as I grew up with athletics, worked my way and played my way through college and afterwards. Most everything I wanted to do ventured through soccer in some means. To me, soccer was an art. And when I lost my hands, especially, it was like, how would a concert pianist, feel about just totally no more playing because I lost parts of my feet. So that was the first thing actually I thought of when I was told when I woke up out of the coma, Mel, was there goes my playing career. I'm done.
So, how high of a level had you played as a player before becoming a coach?
In the United States, I grew up in a time of the North American Soccer League. There was no feeder system. They didn't really even go into the colleges. That was a feeder system for players that were retiring from overseas. So what was going on here when I was playing as a youngster were the club systems. Chicago, St. Louis, out east, everywhere around. I'm central Wisconsin. We had this little bitty club that no one really understood, but we won 2 straight championships and beat some of the larger clubs. I never had the opportunity. Of course, I went on and played in college, and not long after that, NASL fell apart and Major League Soccer didn't come in until I was really into my teaching years and closer to, when I got sick. So I never had that opportunity. Americans really didn't until the 1990s.
All right, so what led you to be at the Nike camp, and why was that moment so significant in your life?
I go back to when I first started going over to Europe to coach. I would be asked to take players from the United States, some of the top players from across the United States, and we go over and play in major tournaments in Europe. I did that right out of college. And actually my first training camp, we started in the Netherlands. And I met a gentleman that was the director of coaching at this training facility. And we got to know each other. His name was Jan. And I kept going back every year to Europe. And the year before I got sick, I went to Europe one more time. And here's Jan at the same training facility, but he was no longer the director of that facility. He was a head coach of the Olympic team. So we ran into each other and we went out to the pub and we got to know each other. He actually asked me invited me to come play in an exhibition against the Olympic team from the Netherlands. My God, that was amazing. But he told me, I know some people in the States. I'm going to see what I can do to help your career. So I was just going in at the end of that summer. I started coaching at the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire. So I moved from the high school level to the college level. And we had a very good first season. We were actually nationally ranked. Going into that next summer, good recruiting trips and everything. Nike called me and said, hey, we heard some good things about you. We want you to come down and speak at the regional camp outside of Chicago. 100 of the top players in the United States will be there, plus coaches from across the country and national team players would be too. Like, no way. But here's my problem, Mel. I wore Adidas. So I showed up and it was scooch me over and, gear me up in all Nike stuff. Well, that's what got me to the Nike camp. And that's where I actually, the illness started creeping in. So, I was on a pretty good trajectory and then something happened.
So you've written a book about this, and we're going to reference the book several times during this conversation. It's called Play from the Heart. So what does that mean, and where did that phrase first take root in you?
Well, I always had a statement to all my players, and it was turn off your brain and play from your heart. So therefore, that's too long of a book title. And since I tagged that, just play from your heart. That's it. Just simplified down into that, and I think it does a really good job of covering what the book is all about. And it's not just soccer. I'm expecting that non-soccer people will appreciate it as well, because I think it did a pretty good job of covering it and not getting too deep into the formalities and things about soccer. So it really plays off of that, and I think that title works extremely well for everything that the book covers.
All right. So I'd like for you to walk us through the moment that everything shifted. Your diagnosis with croup A strep with necrotizing fasciitis.
Very
Tell us about that process. I've been practicing
Yeah,
saying that word, by the way.
it's pretty tough one. Well, that's why the media like to switch it to the flesh-eating disease. It was easier for people, but it doesn't eat flesh. It's what the body does to protect itself with white blood cells. And when they're extremely sick, as I was, the white blood cells build up in the lower, the outer extremities, therefore choking off the blood, and therefore that's when the skin starts to die and things in that order. So I actually, after Nike camp, I didn't know where any hospitals were because it was outside Chicago. My mom was an hour and a half away in southern Wisconsin. So I showed up there, and as wise as all women are, as soon as she saw me, she said, "You get your butt over to the emergency room. Something's really bad." So I did, presented myself. They told me, "Just drink some Gatorade. You're going to be fine." No. So I woke up the next day. I was feeling even worse. Had to cancel some recruiting calls I had coming up in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And the next time I woke up was a month later from a coma to learn that in order to save my life, my family had to make a decision. Let me die, which I was supposed to. And the only reason I was told I was alive because I was an athlete, or amputate both hands at the mid forearm and the front part of each foot and see how I would handle life. I guess it worked out okay. They made the right choice. I know that they probably struggled with doing that, but that's how that all came about. And then it was, after I woke up from the coma, let's get to work.
So when did you realize this was more than a medical crisis and that it would permanently change your life?
Uh, First of all, Mel, when I woke up, I was unable to move. I was told that I had lost 40 pounds, mostly muscle, because being in the medically induced coma. So I had no idea what the heck was going on. I just saw all these machines. So that was freaking me out. And then for the doctor to come in and tell me what had to happen, the mind it kind of shuts down and plays with you when you're learning of information like this. And I think what I did, Mel, was stupid. And I think it's a male thing that I just focused on. All right, let's get to work. I've got to, what time of year is it? I missed Europe because we were supposed to be taking the team over to Europe. They went over there, actually won all three tournaments. And I just wanted to get back to work. I had a soccer team to get to because it was preseason training coming up. Because when I woke up, it was August. And I just focused on that. I totally blew past everything else and went, okay, let's go to work. Let's go to work. And actually started strengthening myself so I could start getting back to work. And again, that was a stupid thing for me to do. I didn't focus on what was going on in my head and definitely not in my heart. And I ended up paying for it.
So how did you contract group A strep?
I asked the doctor about it after I was released. They had no idea, but it did. The bacteria collected in my back, on the outside of my left side of my back. And what I put together, the thought was that I was in training because, like I said before, playing against the Dutch national or Olympic team, I always had opportunities to come in as a guest player. So I was still getting myself prepared for that as well as coaching. And I think what happened was that I never wiped off a weightlifting bench and somebody else probably didn't. So if they happen to have that illness, it affected me though. Maybe it went through a pimple or something, some openness in my back. that's what my thought is, that that's probably what happened, because we didn't clean things off like we probably do now.
Did you ever play an AstroTurf? Could it have come from that?
Oh yeah. I actually played in Camp Randall, soccer in Camp Randall. I grew up wanting to play football in Camp Randall at the University of Wisconsin, but I ended up playing soccer there. So I did play on turf, and I tell you, it was a strange thing back at the time. When indoor came around, everything was on turf, and so we finally got used to it there. But yeah, AstroTurf is a different sort of animal. Much better nowadays, though. I'll tell you that now.
Because I think I've heard of that of players contracting it
Well, yeah,
through
okay.
turf.
Yeah, that's a point. That's I see where your thought was going with that. But at the time, it was just strictly on grass. That's where the only place I was
Okay.
playing. Good thought,
Okay.
though.
Just curious. All right. So, what was it like to suddenly transition from the privilege of your athletic identity to being labeled as disabled?
That's what started me down the rabbit hole towards the depression, because I could tell people were treating me differently. I mean, how could you not? The people that I was close to, my players, the administration at the university, nobody had any clue on how to treat it because everybody felt bad, I'm sure. And I actually started turning that around in my own head, I believe, Mel, that I'm a disruption. So I started thinking negatively about myself. For my family, while I was in the hospital, they were coming over all the time. I had learned that while I was in the coma, uh, people were there all the time until they came up with the solution of the amputations. So I felt a lot of guilt.
So, you described, quote, running into a brick wall of depression.
Yeah.
What did that season truly feel like for you?
Um, I lost my confidence. I mean, as an athlete and being one in athletics, um, I definitely lost my cockiness, and therefore I lost my confidence. So when I started not believing in myself, I started flinching when I would go on recruiting trips because, wow, that was tough. How am I supposed to sell myself by putting out my hand to shake my hand and then, whoa, what's going on with this? So that's part of all the mix that fell in to create the situation where, again, I describe it as just smack dab into a brick wall. Yeah, that's what happened.
So, what was it like adjusting to having prosthetics for on your extremities?
I cover this in the book that I was first fitted with hooks, and I really had a hard time with that. I describe one situation in the book where my mother comes to the hotel, and it's the first time I'm wearing the hooks. I'm trying to feed myself. It was a disaster. So we didn't it wasn't a good time. And then I learned that my brother, who was an insurance agent, worked with the university insurance companies and got me my electric hands. These jobbies are electronic, and so they work off of reading the muscles for opening and closing the hands. Okay, and we all do that. We have electricity that runs through our bodies, and it picks up. But using these, it's not just automatic, as with what we're probably born with, be able to just use it. I had to think what muscles to fire and which ones not to fire. So what I did with that, Mel, was think about how I learned how to bend a soccer ball to make it dip and go around. And that started with accepting failure. So that was going against the maleness side. Accept failure, actually expect failure, and just repetition, repetition, repetition. So it was the same thing I did as a soccer player. I applied to using the myoelectric hands.
Okay, so that segues right into my next question. So, how did your physical loss affect your sense of masculinity, worth, and purpose?
I felt much lesser. There were times when I probably emotionally I could have been blown over with just a puff of air because I just felt nothingness. Uh, I don't know if that happened during matches, but I'll bet that sometimes there were times when my players sensed that was just lacking confidence in what any decisions that I was making. And I don't know if it really came through him, because when I went back, we still had national ranked teams because the focus was there. I think I was able to, I hope the evidence is pretty good, that I was able to fake it. There's one line in the book that I use. I became good at faking myself, faking being myself, because I thought about everybody else and not myself. That's not trying to put blame on anyone. Blame was all on me, about how I would fit in back into society. And it was extremely difficult.
So, can you summarize the $10 million malpractice lawsuit and what it represented emotionally for you?
Well, what I mentioned was when they released me, even though my temperature was just a tick under 103, I never took my blood test, never tested my blood. And the trial was all about, it was a 2-week trial, $10 million, medical malpractice lawsuit. And their expert said wouldn't have mattered. Our expert said it would have. Now, I won't get into, it's people are just going to have to read the book. There's two chapters on all of this, Mel, because it was pretty dramatic. Perry Mason sort of, there was drama in there and everything that was happening. But I'll summarize as this, that a couple of weeks after the trial, I found an article, I believe it was in the New York Times, that cited their expert, that in the article, he stated that there's a window of opportunity when antibiotics would have a positive effect. If we would have had that article at the time, we would have focused on this, because when he was in the trial, he denied ever saying something. We brought up an article where he was quoted in Women's Day magazine, and this is one of the dramatic parts, Your Honor, and all this. And that was allowed to stand, that it was hearsay. So that Women's Day magazine was tossed out. And I wish we would have had the New York Times article, because I think things would have gone in a different direction if we would have had that.
Yeah, so I definitely encourage you getting the book and reading that. Reading the whole book, obviously, but those couple of chapters sound really dramatic and sound really interesting.
Yeah, we blend some quotes and remembrances from a niece, a nephew, a sister, and a brother, and my mother as well, on what she remembered about the time. So it's pretty dramatic, and it led to something else.
Okay. So, as a coach, you like to say breaking yourself down to build yourself back up. What does that process really mean to you?
So I guess I'll cut to the chase. We lost the trial, and I had already resigned my position at the university because I couldn't do it anymore. I was affecting, I didn't think the program was going to go anyplace. And I finally maybe realized, damn it, I need to do something about this. So especially after the loss in the trial, what I did was hook myself up in my room and started looking for solutions. I ended up going out east for a couple of visits. And actually there is, again, in the book, it's one point of discrimination from an athletic director, something I'd overheard from the athletic director after I left our interview. So what I did, Mel, was I pitched all my medals, framed photos, all my awards and everything, just threw them in the dumpster, sold everything that didn't fit in my car. My cat Bogart and I headed west, and it was into a apartment and having to go on food stamps, and that was breaking myself down. And it was time to just start building myself back up from there.
Wow. And so once you stopped fighting reality and started redefining yourself, tell me about that process.
Just something I had to do. It was just no two ways around it. When I went out to Washington State, I had a deal set up with a very well-known college coach. And my pitch to him was, John, I'll come and work for you for free, and I'll work with your analytics and also with your tactics with your team. But what I want in return from you is to use your connections to get me into a position elsewhere afterwards. So I was there for one season. A friend of his was the head coach at University of Gonzaga, was leaving, and we had an agreement, gentleman's agreement. I'd be named as the assistant coach before he announced that he was leaving. Therefore, I would be transitioned into the head coach on an interim basis. Well, at the same time, they brought in a new athletic director, and he was not aware of the deal. So what happened was I came in as the assistant to the previous year's assistant who had no coaching experience whatsoever except for the season before. It was just a simple thing to do. That was a terrible time for me. And I ended up just saying, the heck with this. And I guess another road opened and things kind of changed with 5 little kids.
And we'll get to that in just a couple moments. So, how did music, memory, and faith help carry you through your darkest days?
Here's one of the things I have set up in the book, Mel. What I'm trying to do is to make it interactive for the reader. So there are different parts in the book where specific songs are even mentioned. And what I'd like to suggest to readers is put the book down or open a different tab if they're reading it electronically. Go to Spotify or something, plug in that song, and listen to it. Just, don't just keep reading and reading. Just take a moment, stop, listen to the song, because then it'll help bring them in to the story, I believe. So that's what I play in, but it's also the truth. I have music going all the time. My training sessions, I always have music going. Blues, rock, of course, jazz, some disco, other things, just to for me to try to get the players to play like the music is feeling to me. When they're training or playing, they shouldn't be thinking about the music, but I feel it and I try to get them to play like that. So that's how I have always used music in my training.
So, what are just a couple of songs that are especially meaningful to you?
The song opens, or excuse me, the book opens with my drive down to Chicago for the Nike camp, and I mentioned playing the album, John Mellencamp's album, Whenever We Wanted, and there was a song in there. Sorry, I can't think of it right now. That there's a trumpet, and of course, I had a brand new car, just bought it, I think a week before. I went down there and I was feeling good. Had my Ray-Bans on, sunny day, like 80 degrees, and just cranking some Mellencamp. And I mentioned in the book how still the next day when I was on my way to the Nike camp, how the horns, the trumpet from the Mellencamp song were still in my head. And just throughout, I bring up R.L. Burnside for some funk later on because I like playing funk at training sessions. Tab Benoit is another artist just so many artists in different, not necessarily major difference in genres, but some sort of a blend in the genres and how they all work together. And they're all songs that I think people will appreciate if they just go take a moment, go listen to it.
Okay, that sounds interesting too. So, what did hope look like when it was just barely visible for you?
Gonzaga was a bad experience, like you mentioned. I think when I left soccer soccer was, like I said before, my art, and I loved it. I mean, I played it from here. When I left that and started work, became a dad, I think that was the first phase of me returning to me being me.
Okay, so let's go right into that part of your story now. So, what's the story behind leaving soccer to adopt 5 children from Romania and Ethiopia?
Yeah, there was at the time when I was battling what to do with Gonzaga because the athletic director was pushing me. I want you to apply for this position. Because it was going to come up. The head coaching position was coming up, and it was at home one evening and watching the news out of Seattle, and there was a story on some adopted children by this family, and it was tied to one of the storms in Haiti that killed a bunch of people, and there were these orphan children. There was this family that adopted 2 kids from that, And boom, bulb went off in my head and went, wow, I'm supposed to do something about this. Now, I had been to the Soviet Union. We were invited to go play there. And then when it also became Russia. So something about that always interested me about the people over there. So adopting from Russia, it was Russia at the time then, was like going to an animal shelter. You just go into an orphanage, and if you don't like what you see there, you go to the next orphanage. No. So I ended up going through Romania and adopting a young brother and sister just past diaper stage. And this is in, we only really use the kids as a bridge to tell the story from the illness and everything and the depression to get to the main part of the story at the end. But in that chapter, we go into adoption is not easy, Mel. I mean, it took a year and a half. I offered bribes. I tried to reach out to Oprah to see if she could help. And then Senator Patty Murray from the state of Washington came through on her promise and helped us get those kids home. So it was all of a sudden, you know, I'm a dad to two toddlers. And a year later, a little boy from Ethiopia came home. A year after that, little girl from Ethiopia. And 2 years after that, another little girl from Ethiopia. So here's a soccer coach with a basketball team of 5 kids, you know. It was crazy, but I loved it. I just totally loved it. And the kids from Ethiopia all witnessed their parents die of AIDS. I mean, it was so those 5 kids, I mean, we all had something and just, it was fun. Just, I didn't have to worry. I could just be myself. With that, I didn't have to worry of the outside stuff. And then, you know, as the youngest got secured into high school, then I had the itch to go back for me and do a little bit of coaching or something that turned out pretty good.
Okay, and we'll get to that shortly. So, what did becoming a father to children who needed healing teach you about your own healing?
A new view of myself, introspection, because they had to come first. You know, now I think about it, Mel, maybe I was still faking it a little because I focused on them rather than me, but somehow in the long run, I became more me, pretty close to the me before the illness. I think through, again, not being exposed to discrimination by others or how I viewed myself. That view changed over time because here were these kids that were growing up looking at me and they didn't see me as being disabled. They didn't see me as, yeah, my dad has no hands. That didn't come up at all. So I think it was just a overall process that had to happen over time.
So, what was the reception for your family once you got all 5 together and they started growing? What kind of reception did you get from family members, community members, strangers?
My mother, who grew up during the Depression and used the N word, I remember as a kid, she came around and she looked past color. We also had a heart to heart one time about it was how she was raised at the time and how the country was at the time and the location where she was at the time growing up. So I came to understand that view a bit more. I still hate it, and it still happens, uh, which is ridiculous. But the reception was good, and I think over time, again, my mom came to love those kids, and she would say it openly. You could see it when she would hug them and stuff. So it helped her. Yeah, it was unexpected, but it was a major benefit to somebody.
Nice. That is nice. All right. So, what led you back to coaching a 3rd level group of 12-year-old boys who you call your soccer rats?
Um, well, where we were living at the time was Bellingham, Washington. So it's like an hour and a half. Depends on traffic on I-5. Could be 4 hours north. And there was a large club there. And they had hundreds of kids playing. And these were all kids that the parents were paying a lot of money with the expectation of their kids improving and possibly going on to get scholarships, college scholarships, and maybe play professionally or something. So that's kind of what I was looking for. If I wasn't going to be coaching at the college level, this would probably do. So I applied and was accepted. So when I showed up, there's a new director of coaching there, and I go to it in the book, Mel. It's just one of the most egregious forms of discrimination I had ever come across. The guy, I don't know if he ever shook my hand, but I wasn't given the A team. I wasn't given a B team. I was given a C team of these 12-year-olds. Like, here, go coach them because we need the income. But when I showed up, I looked and saw what I had. And the only distinction I thought, between the kids I have and the A team and the B team was their size and more of a lack of confidence. So what I saw was talent, because I did attend two tryout sessions. I never had a chance to say who should be on which team. It was just here. It was basically, here's the scraps. But I saw something. And the way things do work in Washington is during the summer. So we got together in the spring. We trained for a month or two, and then we did tournaments. And also during that time, Mel, I asked the A team coach if we could scrimmage. No. B team coach, yeah, sure, let's do that. So every Wednesday, Jose and I would get our teams together and we'd scrimmage. First time they kicked our ass. Okay. And then they started improving. We got to the point where we tied. Before we started the summer tournaments, we tied those guys. And I think that helped in the scrimmage. And we got into the playoffs in the first tournament. Second tournament came around and we went to the semifinals. Then there were 3 more tournaments. We got to the final on each one of those 3 tournaments, lost them all. But those kids reached a point by the end of the summer that they were pissed about losing in the last tournament final. So I knew then that these kids are ready, because you're not going to get mad at losing unless you're confident because you expect to win. So I knew that they did a 180. Now here we go into the state league season, 18 matches ahead of us. I mean, long playing into December. And we open with 4 seconds left, and it's in the book. We're up 1-0, opening league match. 4 seconds left. Ball goes up. Our goalkeeper and another player run into each other. And because our goalkeeper went down, the official stopped the clock and wanted to look over after the goalkeeper. He stopped the clock. So they had and the ball went off of his hand and out of bounds behind. So it's a corner kick. So they had the ball to serve a free kick to serve the ball into the area. Well, as the whistle went off, the ball went into the back of the net and we ended up tying.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So we ended up going undefeated. They use that as a drive to go undefeated and win state championship. 12 of those kids advanced to the A team and B team. No one even talked to me after the season or anything. And but we did have a gathering at a facility, and I was able to speak up on stage. And it's in the book. I kind of let one guy have it, and I also tried to help educate students about old school. Let's play a little old school. You don't have to wear $250 cleats, So when that happened, I said, hell with it. I came back to Wisconsin. I started substitute teaching. And I took over a group of 14-year-olds. By the time they were U17s, we won a state championship. And almost all those kids, there's one that's still a senior in high school, but everybody else basically went on to college. Some were playing in college. So it's been fantastic. I ended up becoming my old cocky self again.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So you have a mantra, and that's, my mission is not to teach you, but to put you in a place to learn. Where did that philosophy come from?
I don't know if it happened when I was in college studying education. It probably happened when I was a freshman at college. I started coaching my first team. And I think I came up with it there because I look at soccer as not just like football. You have plays and things. It's flows. So to play quality soccer, you have to have the brain off. So if they get to that point, then they can play from your heart. Um, or excuse me, we're talking about the other. I have two mantras. Um, I always try to put the kids in a position where they're not just, here's a drill, do exactly what I say from disc one to disc two. Let's figure this out so they could learn it, because learning really happens when you put on the spot and you make your own decisions. And the kids were, when they're forced to make their own decisions, yeah, it takes a little longer, but when they learn it, it's rock solid. I mean, then they've got it. And at the end of the book, I keep doing this. In the book, sorry, at the end, I hope those kids realize that I didn't teach them much, but I did put them in a position to learn, and they did it themselves. So nothing I can take credit for. They did it.
Nice. All right. So you mentioned being in Washington. So why did you return to Wisconsin, and what did winning another state championship symbolize for you?
Well, I think part of coming back to Wisconsin and doing what I wanted to be doing finally, it kind of said something to those people that discriminated against me. I was not even interviewed, and that actually happened here too, Mel. Uh, I wanted to get back into teaching full time. I was teaching social studies and history before I went into coach at the college level. Substitute teaching, I proved myself, but then positions had come up. I didn't, I'd apply for them. I didn't even get a chance to interview. And that was bypassed over a head coaching position at the high school here too, even after winning a state championship. So trying to thumb my nose at some people with that, but I'm still stuck in a situation where I'm discriminated against. Maybe age has something to do with it now. I hope not, but it's invisible discrimination that I run up to all the time. So with that, winning that state championship, a lot of it had to do with, here I can prove myself again, and letting people know and helping the disabled community by being a representation of here is what's possible. I mean, just hard work, just be yourself. And over time, things can be accomplished even by somebody with severe disabilities like I have.
All right. So in this next segment, I want to talk about some wisdom that you've developed from your experiences. So let's start with, how has your definition of winning changed?
When before I was sick, it
Yes.
was, yeah. I mean, it was definitely win a national championship. I mean, that was it. I think it changed maybe after the kids and maybe just maturing a bit, where I really felt pride when my soccer rats won the state championship. I was so proud of those kids. I mean, I looked past myself. It just hadn't. I didn't care. Well, I did, but those kids realizing, A plus B plus C plus D, all these end up to winning and getting over that hump of becoming self confident. So yeah, it has changed, but I still like winning. It's still fun.
Winning is the best. I'm very competitive. And
Okay.
it's so funny. My daughter, who's an adult now and is married, she definitely, I could tell she grew up with me. I overheard her talking to her husband once, and he was excited. They were competing at some like trivia game or something, and they got second place, and he was excited about that. And she said, "Second place is the first loser."
Oh,
And I
yeah, there you
thought,
go.
that's my daughter right there. All right, so what do you now understand about suffering that you couldn't have known before all of this happened?
I've learned so much about becoming a disabled person that there's there's still ADA rules. There's still so much wrong that has to be corrected. But, and here's what I've decided about the book, Mel, is I want this thing to give me a platform. Two different ways that I see as my responsibility with the book: help the disabled community and maybe help get it organized, get it working. I often talk to people about follow the LGBTQ example and how organized they are. Follow that. I have some friends over in Europe in the disabled community over there, and they talk about their splintered. Well, I haven't noticed anything organized over here either. So I want to see if I can get involved in helping that move forward, whatever way I can, whatever, let's see what happens. I'm not going to turn anything down. But on the other side, I think it's also a responsibility of mine to help educate the non-visually disabled with, for example, here, Mel, um, I've talked to people that are involved in helping the disabled community people get jobs. Well, I read a comment once about the disabled people are the type of people that should be getting jobs because of the crap that they have to deal with all the time. They understand hard work. They understand what it means to deal with negatives and how to overcome things. So it's right there. The disabled people, they're the ones you should be hiring. And I think there's a tendency we just have to educate the non-visually disabled community about take another look, or actually take a first look, will you? So just try to make it more simple and help both sides of who's dealing with disability.
And so, what do you hope your own children and players take away from your story?
There have been players that have interviewed me for like a speech class, or one I gave him the very first draft of this book. I said, well, here, read this and work off of that. And I hear positive reports about. In the book, there is one kid that talks about how he gets the teacher in his class to turn on the I not italicized, but so people
Captioning.
can, yeah, the captioning. Thank you. He gets the teacher to turn on the captioning, and because that's not done when I substitute teach and I walk in and there's a video or something, captions probably aren't already set, so I have to go put the captions on. It's a little thing like that. So things fit together and still frustrating, but in different ways.
So, why is the ending of your book redacted? And what does that silence symbolize?
I learned that author does not give away the end because the end's pretty good. Wait till it's when people read the book drops June 9, 2 days before the World Cup opener, 2026. And at that time, it'll be revealed what the ending is. There's something about writing I learned about dropping kernels here and there that you could capitalize on. So there's something earlier in the book that the ending has to do with. So I want that to stir up some interest and some, maybe some people guessing what is the end of the book. Because what we end with is, oh, and guess what? And then, any people like you and the other media, it's not going to say the ending. It's going to be redacted.
Okay. Again, that's intriguing. I'm curious, which is what you want. Yes, exactly. So let's start to wind down the conversation with some inspiration for some other people. So for someone listening who feels broken or lost, what would you say to them directly?
Trust yourself, which may also be the hardest thing. It should be the simplest thing. That's the problem I had when I was in the midst of depression. But really, it should come down to that, I think, Mel. Trust yourself because it's in there. Think about it, everything you had to go through. When I first came out of the hospital, it'll take me 3 hours to get dressed. Well, if I would have had someone, I'm not trying to blame anybody, but if I was seeking therapy at the time and somebody who said, look what you do every day to get here, 3 hours to get dressed. Of course, I worked it down. Now it takes me half an hour. But look at some of those, pick some of the easier things, the positive things in your life, and think about those, and then just start fitting those together, like maybe like pieces of a puzzle, to try to put the whole thing together. And of course, I think the biggest thing is just time. And that's difficult when you have kids and you have to go back to work. How do people handle all this? I mean, there's so much to go on because it could happen to anybody at any time. And then what? So I understand it.
And so if you could summarize your own life in one final lesson, what would that lesson be?
Wow, man. Not looking back or not going back to like trying to change things. You're talking about, yeah, if maybe I could summarize what I did. I think it would be proud of what I've accomplished. I mean, it's unfortunate what I've had to do, and a lot of people probably could do what I've done. They just never been placed in the position. So I can't say that I'm an amazing person or anything like that. I just should be able to pat myself on the back for what I've done and what I've gone through and what I've accomplished. So I've done okay.
I agree. Pat yourself on the back. That's good job, sir. So, final question today. What does it truly mean today, after everything you've experienced, to play from the heart?
Now it comes through watching my players when I know that their brains are off and they're just playing. Sometimes I can get kids to do it. Most of the times they can do it. Sometimes they don't. But when they're free flowing, like the music, when they're free flowing and just that's the beauty of the game. When I can see the beauty of the game and the ball just going from here to there and then finding holes in the opponent and breaking down the opponent or shutting down the opponent defensively, when all of that stuff happens. And by the way, when I'm coaching, my mouth's shut. I might have a notepad and I might jot down a couple of things, but I just let them play. Yeah, that's what I really get off on that now. It's so cool.
So that's how we're going to wind down the conversation today. So our guest today has been soccer coach Scott Martin, the author of the upcoming book, Play from the Heart, which is available for pre-order at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and several other places. Scott, thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mel. Fantastic. I love what you're doing with the show, man. Keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll pat myself on the back, too.
There you go.
So Scott's story reminds us that life doesn't end when everything changes. Sometimes that's exactly where it begins. Through loss, reinvention, and purpose, he shows us that what it really means to play from the heart. So if this conversation stirred something in you, share this episode with someone who needs hope. This is Stories from Real Life. And until next time, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.